Hey folks, welcome back again to the Hidden Day. We got an extra special show for you today. I didn't even know what to call it, but it's really cool. We're going to talk about a geocentric model of the universe, and who better to do that with my friend Mondo Gonzales, who studies the stars all the time. Mondo, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. So we had a little discussion with this. We were out on a mission previous to this, and we got to meet, and then we were talking about all the crazy things of the universe. And it's nice to talk with someone who has a geocentric model that is not necessarily flat Earth. Okay, because just, if I'm going to tweak anybody, I do not believe in the flat Earth. I don't think it's viable in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think any of the verses, sometimes 100 verses or so that people give me, have anything to do with a flat Earth. They're just misconstrued. But we're going to talk about a geocentric model, which is similar, except the Earth is a globe, but basically stuck in the center of the universe, which would answer a lot of the questions that we have. And then everything else spins around it. And we've been able to at least evaluate what it would look like in that sense, and answer all the same questions and see the same mathematical model that we would see now. And that math would answer both. If you're heliocentric and geocentric, the math would work out for both for the same. I don't know if that made any sense at all today.
Well, I'll say up the front, like when you and I were talking in Ohio, I'm no expert on the geocentric model. I'll say that right up front. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we talked about was, having a conversation where we would explore some of the things that are out there, because, I'm an observational guy. I spend a lot of time out looking at the stars and with my telescope, and in the process of building an observatory where I'll be housing a couple different telescopes and doing astrophotography and other research. But to me, it's very interesting and intriguing that I think when you see the conversations out there, especially in the astronomy field, I think in terms of the Astronomy Magazine and others, I'm a subscriber. I read kind of all the latest and greatest in the James Webb and all this stuff that they're trying to do, and the challenges that they're finding right now. With the James Webb scope as an example, some of the things that are challenging the typical Big Bang cosmology. But no, I think this will be a fun discussion. I'm not going to claim to have all the answers by any means.
But we're just looking up.
Yeah, just look it up. That's what I do. I'm like, well, how about this? And how do we reconcile this and with what I see and what I observe?
Yep. And that's where we're going. We're going, hey, we're just going to explore this and look. This isn't an argument for or against, although I'm somewhat convinced myself. But you know what? If something comes up and I'm wrong, whatever. We're going to find out soon enough. I just know I haven't been out there yet. I haven't been to the sun, and I haven't been past the sun. So I don't know exactly what it looks like. But we're going to go in like from the word and see, hey, does this make sense given what we've been taught? But we always open the show with a prayer. So would you do that for us, Mondo?
Yeah, absolutely. Father in heaven, you are the creator. You're the one that gave it all to us. We have your word. Help us to interpret your word carefully and accurately in its original context, and just having some of these basic principles. We don't want to misrepresent anything, and we don't want to misrepresent you. And so we ask for your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So the first thing I want to present is right out of the gate. What day was the Earth created?
Well, it seems pretty straightforward that the first thing that was created was this ball of water. Well, you know what? It doesn't say it's a ball, so we'll just say that there's a blob of water, however you want to say it.
Mm-hmm. And then he created the land. And then what day were the sun and the moon and all the hosts of heaven created?
We see those on Genesis 1:14 through 16 on the fourth day. And I do think it's interesting going back to, the idea of light. I think that was what's created on the first day. And then I think very clearly, let me just give me a minute to say this, because in the Hebrew, this is crystal clear, because oftentimes in modern secular cosmology, or even theistic evolutionary cosmology, they try to force something on the text, and which I think is unfair, in that there's this idea of the long ages, the long age theory. And so, regardless of what somebody says, the Hebrew is very clear, because this is something that is not often shared, but the Hebrew uses two different types of words. You have what's known as a cardinal and as an ordinal. And an ordinal is like first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, where a cardinal is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we use those. We speak about the third day of the month versus day 3. Now, what's interesting, though, is in the Hebrew, it's very clear in Genesis 1 that it says there was an evening and there was a morning equals one day. So it's using a cardinal there, and Hebrew scholars will wrestle and go, well, why did they use a cardinal here and not the ordinal? Because the next day it says there was an evening and morning the second day. So it's not saying day 2, it actually uses the word second. And so, but if you look at it and you see it, if you read it very clearly in Hebrew, it's saying, it's using a predicate nominative form, in the sense of, it's saying this: there was an evening and a morning equals one day. So what you have is this 24-hour, what we know today is a 24-hour period of rotation. So to me, you have a light source, which clearly was God, because that appears in Revelation 21 and 22, where there is no sun, there's no need. Why? Because God is the light. So God creates a light source, and the only way you can have an evening and morning is if you have this light source coming from a side view, if you wanted, so that as it's rotating. So it proves a separate light source, which was God. It also proves some sort of rotation, again, which is a little bit contradictory to some of the other views that say the Earth wouldn't be spinning. But it also tells you that the definition of a day, of one day, is a is an evening and a morning. So then when you go to the second day and it says it was the second day or third day, you go, oh, I got it. This was the second or the third rotation of an evening and morning. And of course, evening and morning is repeated through the whole narrative.
Except for the Sabbath day, right?
I'm not sure what it says. I don't remember what it says on the sixth day, or as it relates to this.
The seventh day, I think we have to look into that. I don't know, my mind just jumped there. I think the Sabbath day kind of stayed there. Anyway, we'll look into that in a minute. Just a random thought. That is genius, though, because there are people that say, oh, it's an age, or it's this, or it's that. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not mad at people, if they think that, because they use terms like tohu vavohu, and they look at and all these different things, and they kind of, what I would say, agree, is forcing things into the text, because the clear indication is that the plants were made on day 3. Or the third day.
Yeah.
How did they last for all this time without the sun?
Yeah. Well, you have a variety of things there that, you have the vegetation, and of course we know in our modern world, maybe things were different then, but if we just compare it, to have fruit trees, how do you have fruit trees? They need pollination. So when were the bees and stuff? Well, those were created later, on the 6th day or the 5th or 6th day. So now you have all this stuff on the 3rd day lasting without a sun, without light, you have the light, but you don't have photosynthesis based on our sun, but you also don't have pollination, because if it's kind of millions of years trying to squeeze in there, you have a variety of issues. And I think God did that intentionally.
Yeah.
In order just to sabotage some of this naturalistic, materialistic views.
Yeah, I would agree. Where is it? 1 Peter, he talks about one day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is one day. The whole narrative in there is about they were willingly ignorant of the flood and the Genesis creation story. So yeah, that kind of fits in with that too. And what we're going to try and reconcile is, if the sun wasn't created till day 4, how is it just sitting there randomly, and then all of a sudden it starts flipping around the sun when there's no narrative of that at all? Okay. And Copernicus was, a sun worshiper. So he's like, oh, it has to revolve around the sun because that's God in the center of the universe, blah, blah, blah. So don't necessarily buy it, but that's what we've been taught.
Well, let's I think that'd be good to dwell there for a minute, because again, as we're exploring this, you have in the Genesis 1:14 through 16, you have two, right? You have the greater light and the lesser light, both created on that day, as well as the other stars. So a lot of this I'm exploring with you because I haven't necessarily heard how it's presented, but I guess from the text you do have the God flinging, if you wanted to say it this way, the moon revolves around the earth, right?
Yep.
And so you have the moon going into orbit, and then of course the sun is there with the planets going around orbits, at least that I observe in the sky. So it's interesting, and there's no doubt you see movement of stars as well. I mean, we see the stars. I mean, again, a lot of the question that comes up is the distances that you see allow for not always, not a perfect, but a very consistent, what we call constellations or asterisms that stay together, even though modern astronomy is saying that these are moving at, who knows how many, kilometers per second or however they use it.
Gazillion.
Yeah. But the distances allow those things to look relatively stationary, but it is clear that when you look at several asterisms are changing, even some constellations, you see them based on our frame of reference. So is there movement? Yeah, I didn't see any issues with that necessarily. I mean, based on what I see sitting out there in my backyard.
Yeah, and if he flung them, then it probably still flunging along the way. It's kind of what I think. But he said he sent them out like a tent too. So that'll speak to Hubble and what we'll get into in a little bit.
Okay.
All right, cool. So that's what I think. It is created on day one. All right. And so there it is, but he put it in a stable position. So I want to go over a couple verses that talk about it being on a foundation. And I think what happens with the flat earth argument is that, they think it's on a foundation like this. Oh, but you can have a foundation like a gyroscope. Gyroscope is spinning around, but because of that movement, it's solid in its movement. That's technically a foundation where it's not going to be moving out of that direction. So you can use this for both models. You can say, hey, it's sitting on top of something, but then what's underneath it? What's the gravity holding it down? Then you need something that it's sitting on. Well, what's that sitting on? Well, what's that sitting on? Where if it's in the center of something and just floating, essentially that makes more sense because now it's just hovering there. So let's take a look. Isaiah 48:13. And it says, surely my hand has founded the earth and my right hand spread out the heavens. When I call to them, they stand together. Isn't that nice? So he founded the earth and he spread out the heavens. So went, whoosh. All right. Don't forget the Hubble. We'll get there in a minute. Proverbs 8:29. When he set for the sea its boundaries so that the water would not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth. All right. Where were you in Job 38:4? Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? So clearly there's a foundation here. And I'm thinking if it's hurling through space and it's flipping around things, what kind of foundation of the earth is there? Now we can think of a foundation of a house on the earth. It's a different thing, but the earth itself has to have some kind of a foundation, and that would be it. And that's where I think the misconstruence is of saying that it's sitting on something when I think the foundation it's not moving in a central position. Psalm 104:5, he established the earth upon his foundation so that will not totter forever and ever. Okay. And in 2 Samuel 22, the channels of the sea appeared in verse 16. The foundations of the world were laid bare by the rebuke of the Lord. Oh, okay. Let's move on from that one. That's a scary thought. Okay, there's a whole bunch of them. Let me try and find a really good one. Flees disaster, kindle my anger. Foundation of the mountains or shook and quake. And Zechariah 12:1, the burden of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord, who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundation of the earth, and forms a spirit of man within him. So there's plenty of verses which confirm that there's a foundation. So what does that foundation look like? Now, we've been taught like a gravity kind of connection to the universe, but clearly gravity is not strong enough to reach some of these stars and even the planets as far away as they are. So I think it's more of a plasma or electromagnetic field that's keeping the orbits and everything together. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's interesting because I think that in all of this, we're trying to, I guess for myself, I always encourage humility because we're trying to, the best we can, look at what the scripture says and then try to match it up with what we observe in the universe. And I think even like what you just mentioned as it relates to plasma, or even the whole the idea of an electric universe, providing better explanations for some of the things that modern astronomy, or the modern, I would use the word either cosmology, or the other word is cosmogony, where it's talking about not only cosmic scales, but as well as the origin of these things. And so to me, it just reminds me of some of the challenges that you have and why modern astronomy will create, like, okay, well, we're going to create dark matter or dark energy. Have you ever observed that? No, but
Hey, I have a piece right here.
Yeah, it has to be there. Well, why? Because, and again, these guys aren't dumb, but they're seeing something. Like, you take a large galaxy, which I'd love to, look at those and photograph them because they're beautiful. But you see these perfectly aligned spiral arms, etc., and they go, well, there's not enough gravity there to keep those arms held together at the way it is. So then they create there has to be this invisible dark matter that's holding it, because they're stuck in a gravitationally bound universe where some of the things that people talk about, the electric universe, where it seems to be a little bit, it solves those issues where you don't need to create something that you've never observationally, empirically seen. It's simply on paper. This has to be there. Well, that sounds like a little bit of fabrication to me.
That's like the Orion belt. What belt is that? Where these magical asteroids come from the belt outside the universe?
The Oort cloud and the
Oort cloud. Yeah, that's it. Like Oorts. The Oorts.
The Oorts.
Yeah. Oh, we haven't seen it, but these asteroids are coming from somewhere.
Yep. Comets and asteroids got to come out of somewhere. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, side note, I think the asteroids come from when the Earth went during the flood, and then like pieces blew off, and then we blew up that whole planet between Mars, and I think they come from that. But that's side note. Okay, squirrel. All right, so that is exciting to me. I wanted to talk about if we're not the center, okay, and we're flipping around in space and flipping around the sun, and it's going like this, and how does the North Star stay in relatively the same spot? Well, we know it's off a little bit, but essentially it's the same spot, which is why they call it the North Star, or Polaris is the name of it. So how would a geocentric model, like I think it would fit better into that narrative than something that's just flying through space. How would that star stay in the same spot if everything's moving so rapidly and expanding like crazy?
That's the typical answer is that you have, again, I'll give you the typical answer, which you and I were talking about earlier, where, I'm out with my telescope and I have to set it up because I don't have my permanent observatory just yet. But every night I go out there, and because my telescope is different, I have to set it up and point it towards the north, what they call the North Celestial Pole, which either way, the Earth is spinning because it's a ball. It has an axis through the center pointing somewhere. If it's spinning, it's going to have that, just even theoretically or conceptually. So, but what is very well known among amateur astronomers, and others, is that that North Celestial Pole is not lined up directly towards Polaris. And not only that, but Polaris itself is moving around. If you do a star trail picture, a time lapse, you can see it.
That's always fun. Yeah,
It is.
search
It's
that one,
beautiful.
folks. Search
People can look
Star
up
Trek.
Polaris Star Trek. It comes up, but that's an interesting question, and I don't know if I have the answer specifically, only because I know what I see. The typical answer is that the Earth in its spinning like a top is wobbling, which is causing that pole. People can look this up on Wikipedia. They actually have a pretty good a GIF image where they show a top spinning like this, and this is something observational you can measure, and you can, especially if you are an astronomer over a lengthy period of time or 10 years, you will be moving your center in order to do astrophotography. You'll be moving it every so often. In order to keep it centered. How does it get there? The wobble. So that's a good question. Maybe you can answer is, generally speaking, two things. The Earth seems to have a very clear wobble that can be demonstrated scientifically, or at least when I'm out in the backyard. But you asked another question: is how does it stay that way? Well, if there's looking at it from the geocentric model, you could say, oh, that it's there. The other answer is that these hosts of stars are moving in harmony, not necessarily even gravitationally bound, hypothetically. I'm giving you the modern answer. Because if you go to the southern hemisphere, there is no central star at all. It's
trying to point, right?
Pardon?
But it's still a point.
It's
There's
still
just
a point.
No star,
yes.
But it's a point.
Yeah, so that's what I say is when you're in the southern hemisphere, I got a buddy down there who's got a big telescope, and him and I talk all the time. But he goes, man, I wish I had Polaris, only in the sense of for orienting himself. He still there is a south celestial pole, which is the same idea. It's just extremely difficult to find, where I can just go to Polaris and go a little bit over here, depending on the time of day, and then boom, my telescope's set up. But is it possible? Again, looking at it, we're trying to look at it all the ways. How is Polaris staying there? Well, it's not necessarily staying there, but if God threw all these, for example, another way to look at it is look at the constellations, because the constellations are relatively constant. Even as you mentioned in the book of Job, he questions Job in Job 38 about Orion and the Pleiades. And those things are bound together gravitationally, because he even uses the term bind there. Can you bind them together? And so astronomers look and go, wow, it is interesting that, how did Job get this right?
Yeah, because it's a belt, right? It's really cool.
Yeah.
So as far as that little wobble that we see, I think some of that has to do with a couple different things. Now, during the flood, we hear that the Lord spoke, and then the fountains of the deep broke, and then the water started coming out of the sky. Well, rakia, the original firmament, has its roots in hammered out and thin metal sheets. So there's reason to believe there was a canopy sphere over the whole Earth, which filtered out the ultraviolet rays and a lot of different things. But it specifically says the fountains of the deep broke first, and we can see the ring of fire that goes around the Earth. Now, if anyone knows how a microwave works, basically it vibrates things really fast so they heat up. So if God speaks, he can speak at a tone which would crack the earth, just like putting an egg in a microwave. And I think that's what happened along the lines that, I think hell had to expand to put the spirits of the Nephilim in, and a lot of different things. But it cracked, and that's where we see that volcano line. I think the fountains came up and they shot up because they were under so much pressure and so hot, and they melted the canopy in, and that's why we saw 40 days of rain that filled up the whole earth. That being said, I think that event kind of knocked it off kilter a little bit. So now it's like wobbling. And in addition to, sending things like meteorites and just rocks out into space from it, shooting up out of these things. Because if you go to a geyser, there's always all sorts of things in there. Might even be a rabbit at one point. That I think would be a wobble. But we also got Joshua's long day. Now, if we're in Joshua 10:12, it said, Joshua then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day the Lord delivered up the Amorites and children of Israel, he said, in the sight of Israel, sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. Okay, so that would actually lead to a geocentric model as well, because he didn't tell the Earth to stand still, so it looks like the sun is over here. It kind of said sun and moon stand still. So I imagine the whole universe stopped, and that would it could do a jolt as well. Maybe that was some of the keys to, making that little bit of a wobble that we have. Okay. And the moon stayed until the people have avenged themselves. And then we see, something similar when Jesus was crucified. What happened? There's stories around the whole planet of this huge earthquake. So much that clearly the Bible says the rocks were rent in two. It tore rocks in half, like mountain rocks, and a 3-hour eclipse. Well, what does that? I think some kind of a body came between the sun and the earth and caused this earthquake and everything, and then caused a 3-hour eclipse, because the moon can only do like max 7 minutes, right?
No, not even. I mean, an eclipse lasts, maybe, if you're lucky, you get 3 minutes. Where a lunar eclipse will last a couple hours. But what you see in the book of Matthew lasting 3 hours, you usually get 3 minutes on a great solar eclipse. So that's truly supernatural.
Yeah. So obviously that could do a kilter on the rotational orbit of the Earth as well. So I think there's clearly enough evidence that maybe something happened. And he said he'll do it again. He said the Earth will reel like a drunkard in the end of the age. So, and I've had my run-in with some drunkards. I know how they reel.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because Isaiah 24:20, it says that exact thing, where what's coming are these cosmic, truly cosmic level perturbations during the tribulation, where it's going to be so bad: stars, sun, moon, eclipses, other eclipses, asteroids, whatever. But the Earth itself is going to be, you think about a wobble, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, the Earth wobbling. Which leads us to, if the stars are falling, is that a metaphor, or did they really fall? And do we have enough of a parallax position to actually prove that they're X amount of miles away like they say they are? Let's jump into that for a little bit.
Well, why don't you explain for the audience, in the sense, what is parallax first? Some people might not even know what that means.
Oh, you should know. What's the matter with you?
Sorry, I'm an interviewer too, so I always try to defend the audience. Like, hey, they don't really know, or they might not know.
I'll give you the New York version. Hey, what's wrong with this picture, pal? So basically, that's how you measure the distance from something. You take the angle of a shadow and you measure how far that is, and then once you know the angle of the shadow, you can figure out how tall it is. All right. Well, if we're just here on the Earth, I don't think we can get far enough away to measure any kind of a shadow to get the hypotenuse of this right triangle, because a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So how do we know? I mean, are we just told these numbers? Was there an actual way they measured them? Are they assuming that going by the speed of light? Because I think the speed of light is actually deteriorating, in my humble opinion. So was it different back then? So what are your thoughts on the actual distance of the sun, the moon, the stars?
Well, a couple things. As it relates, it's interesting to me that, I come from, taking astronomy in college. And so, I've been entrenched, not only observationally being out there, but looking at things from the typical model. But, parallax isn't make-believe, but it's interesting because, so if you're looking at the sun, or you're looking at maybe in the morning you see a certain constellation, pick a star, pick Sirius or something. Okay, Sirius is just southwest of Orion, and it's the brightest star in the sky. So you see Sirius coming up, and then at this time of the year, and you measure, you're like, okay, I'm going to take a clock now, and then I'm going to wait a certain period of time, because this is how they do it. So let's just, it doesn't matter whether it's the sun moving or whether it's the earth moving in both of them. What you do is you have movement relative between the earth and the sun. And so you're taking a calculation of where that particular star is relative to the sun, because that's our visual. We're visualizing this. So as we wait 4 or 5 months, 3 months, whatever, all of a sudden now that star is going to be in a different position visually. So
right.
If you take that angle and then you take that angle, it creates an X. So you have this. So then based on mathematics, trigonometry and others, you're looking at the angle now that's behind there, and that'll give you relative speeds as well as distances between what you see there. So parallax, I think, is a very interesting thing. You can do it on Earth. You can go out there and do parallax over here, but you have to move. You have to move yourself over based on 2 points. So again, it's a real thing. I think parallax is very predictable. Now, even what astronomy will tell you is, and even going back to Edwin Hubble, parallax has its limits as it relates to understanding distances. The way that, and it's pretty complicated, we won't get into it here, but one of the ways that they were looking at distance is not so much their parallax, because they realized the limits, but they looked at something called a Cepheid variable. That a Cepheid variable is this super bright something that is pulses, and it varies. That's why they call it a variable. But based on the luminosity factors and other things, they were able to calculate certain levels of distance in addition to parallax. So to me, you know, I do think that parallax and the Cepheid variable calculations that we had to do them in college and also look at it. I think that there is certainly some legitimacy there, but to get specific and exact, I don't know. Again, I go back to humility. Some of this stuff, is not as certain as many people want us to believe.
Okay, so it may or may not be what they say it is.
In the great distances that they bring up. Yeah, see, here again, we have to balance it so carefully, because if we come off and say, oh, these guys are a bunch of idiots, parallax is absolutely worthless, well, that's not true. I'm not saying you're saying that.
You can't get far enough away to actually measure a decent parallax. That's like going here and then moving an inch over.
Right.
And trying to figure it out. Well, like the Earth compared to, Andromeda, yeah, it's like moving it an inch. How are we going to figure it out?
Yeah, and that's why most of the time they'll wait for 3 or 4 months because they'll look for, again, either the sun is moving at a very fast distance around, or the Earth is moving at that very calculated. I mean, the typical thing is the Earth is moving at 66,000 miles an hour around the sun. But again, observationally, I can see where that star has moved from that position over to this position.
Right.
That is 100% fact.
Yes.
And so that's what we look and we go, pardon?
But how far is it is the question.
Yeah, it's how far is it, because it's going to determine, you're going to see it out there somewhere. And even there, it's the angles and it's the speed and it's the very, very advanced, again, mathematics, which you and I were talking about earlier. Yeah. That some of the mathematics is very similar, because both groups are trying to analyze observationally what they see.
Because I know what I see, and with the phone that I'm recording on right now, I have a Galaxy S20, and I actually took several pictures of the surface of the moon with my phone, which is between 225,000 and 250,000 miles away at any given point, is what they say. But I can't seem to get a picture of California, which is only, 2,500 miles away.
Well,
it's just weird to me. So
I think
maybe because there's nothing in the way, there's no atmosphere. Probably a lot of that has to do with it, but it does beg the question.
Well, I guess in exploring this, certainly the atmosphere has something to do. Obviously you couldn't because of curvature.
Right. Even up in the sky, I was trying to, when I was flying, try it, and I couldn't even see, like when I flew to Ohio, I couldn't even see New York anymore. So it's probably clouds and whatnot in a way, I would imagine. But just for me to actually take a picture of the moon was like, is that closer than they say it is?
Well, it's interesting. You know, what they'll tell you is that if they'll do experiments where they will, you'll be able to see reflections, speed of light calculations, and again, it all comes back to the science, as it relates to measuring the speed of light, which certainly you can measure the speed of light on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
It varies with lasers and other things, and then as you cast it off towards this whatever you're looking at, maybe the moon. I know in past, at least that's what I was told, is that they were able to send signals towards the moon and have them come back and be bounced back, which even if it's radio signals or something like that, where
yeah, radar.
Yeah, you'd get because radio signals move at the speed of light. It's part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and so instead of maybe light, but sending radio out and having it come back, they would be able to measure the distance and see again. But that's at a small scale. So, again, I'm not 100% sure what the geocentric model would say as it relates to the distance of the moon, but I think that would be certainly one way. It'd be interesting to see how that they interacted with some of those experiments of sending something back and having it echo back.
I just think, and I'm not so much dogmatic on this point, but I think if it's smaller and closer together, number one, when the stars fall from the sky, that explains it, and number two, it'd be easier to spin around at that rate. The universe spinning around the Earth, it would be easier if it's closer together and smaller. That's all.
I think that's a good point to bring back up, because I think some of the challenges that you have, not you, but specifically like you take some of the flat Earth thinking, again, I give them credit because I know I have a good buddy of mine, love him to death. He's great. He loves the word, loves Jesus, saved. I think it ultimately comes back to hermeneutics and which is the art and the science of biblical interpretation, where genre is very important, because many times what you have is people using maybe some of the poetic language that's found in the Bible, and they take it, they want to take it in a very straightforward, literal way, and we just got to be careful. Like, well, where are we getting that from? I'll give you an example, because in Psalm 91 verse 4, it talks about us being hidden under the shadow of God's wings.
Yep.
So my question is God, what color are his feathers? Now, if you asked somebody that maybe was subscribed to some of the flat Earth, they'd say, well, no, that's clearly poetic. Or I don't know, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would force themselves, because they've taken some of the other poetic language and they forced it to be literal. There would be a little bit of inconsistency there. So as an interpreter, if I want to say God thus says the word of God, I got to be careful that I look at some of the language and where it's at. Let me give you another quick example. Hebrew scholars have done a comparison of looking at Genesis 1 and 2, because the question is it long ages? Okay, we talked about that a little bit before, but what they've noticed is that if you compare the creation account in Genesis 1 and 2 in the Hebrew versus the creation account in Psalm 104, okay, it's a psalm, it's a song, right? If you look at the verbs in the Genesis account, it's using these very specific preterite style verbs that are meant for narrative, fact, boom, here it is, and this, vayiktol verbs, these verbs that are there. And there's no reason to force on the text that it has any poetic really value. It's given you a history of what's happened, and it's using this specific style of verb. If you go to Psalm 104, those verbs are absent completely. And so you go, oh, well, so the Hebrew is giving us this understanding that the Psalm, it's speaking about various things. So we just have to be careful and make sure that we're looking at the Hebrew, the linguistics, as it relates to the genre, so that we don't force it on. And that's all, because many times there's an inconsistency there.
Yeah, I would agree. And we're going to have Professor Herman on soon as well. Hermeneutics.
Oh, good. He's
You know
good.
him?
He's a
Yeah.
solid guy. Oh yeah, good friends with him. Got to know him a long time ago. He saved me a lot of trouble in my life.
Yeah. Thanks, Herman.
Yeah.
Sorry, how to do it. All right, so I'm going to talk about the abyss.
Oh yes.
Yes, who doesn't love the abyss? Me, I don't love it. Now, my question is this: what does abyss mean? What's the root of that?
Well, you when you see this word appear in the book of Revelation, it's a Greek word, abuso. You and I were talking about a little bit earlier. This idea of a is a like atheist or agnostic. A is a letter in Greek, which is just a negation. So in the sense of abuso, you have no bottom. And so and this is where you see Jesus talking about in Matthew 12:40 that he was going to be in the heart of the earth, just like Jonah was. And so I believe Jesus went he went down. But it's interesting that if you take simply the word abuso, bottomless pit, you're like, well, how is there such thing as a bottomless pit? Well, but if you take it in the imagery, the opposite of a bottomless pit would be that everywhere is up. So that you come to the point where there's nowhere else to go, because if you went that far there, all of a sudden you'd be going up.
Yeah,
So
no matter what direction you go, it's up.
no matter what direction
No
you
bottom.
go. So there's no doubt that the Bible speaks in terms of a bottomless pit, and it can, if you have a globe where there is a center, by definition of a globe or a sphere, if you're at the center, everywhere is up, and therefore nowhere is down. It's not like you don't need to be, again, using a literal. If we were to go literal, well, I'm going to go in a place that's just literally falling forever. It doesn't need to be that literal. It's using real, I would say, straightforward language, but by definition, the figurative nature of the language itself, which is not only figurative, it's actually very literal in its illustration, that there's a point where everything else is up. Therefore,
it's very descriptive. And I would also add that would be the center of what we would know as gravity, but I think is more the center of all forces of the universe would again be at this abyss, or abuso with no bottom, because the same all directions would be out of the center of all forces of the universe. So if the center of the universe is in the center of the earth, then the earth is in the center of the universe, and it's on its solid foundation.
Another way, here, I'll give you a devil's advocate argument, because I think I can hear people already, that if you took, for example, if we were on the moon is obviously a globe. I mean, you can see 59% of it. Watching it, you can tell that it's spinning, and based on where it is in its orbit, many people like to argue that it's just some circle's disk, but it really isn't. You can actually see, even though it faces the Earth in its orbit most of the time.
Yeah, but if it's over here, you see this side, but over there, you see that side.
Yeah, and it shifts, so you can actually see up to 59% of the surface. But if you were to stand on the moon and you went to the center of the moon, there, would you be in an abuso as well? In one sense, you would be. If that was your context, was the moon's...
In a mini sense, yeah.
Yeah, you would be there, and you'd be like, oh, well, from here, everything is up in the center of that. So I think many people might say, well, hey, is the Bible describing the center of all things when it describes the abuso? Some would say yes. Others say no, that's the context of the earth itself. But I will say this, as it comes to, let's say somebody hates the geocentric idea. I will say this, that what astronomers now have seen, especially with James Webb, that the very, very precise measurements that they're seeing, and the resolution. Okay, what we do know is that anywhere you look, whether they did it with Hubble, it doesn't matter, because I can go out and look at the same things that they're looking at and see them. But everywhere you look, no matter which part of the sky you look, they have never found an end. Ever. So it's not like that. They right now, even again, let's take the modern cosmology. They cannot say, hey, by the way, that's over there in that direction of the Pleiades, or this direction of Orion, or whatever the Ursa Major. Pick a constellation. Even pick ones that are on the opposite side. They cannot say, if we point there, we can see that this is closer to the edge of the universe versus that way. They can't. So does that could just indicate that the size is so big that our telescopes aren't savvy enough to see the resolution? Or it also could indicate that the Earth is centralized.
Mm-hmm.
That anywhere you look, up, down, pick anyway, there's nothing. We're not. They cannot prove we're at the edge, or hey, we're this far over. That's observational fact.
Yeah, because it's equidistant infinity in all directions. Essentially.
Like, observationally, right now, mathematically, they would say no. There has to be some sort of end, hypothetically, but they talk about space expansion, and that gets a little bit complicated. But observationally, they're not any closer to the edge looking that way than they are in the opposite direction.
Nice. I would tend to agree with that as well. And I got some more funny things to say, but we'll save them for later because this is exciting. You're familiar with the Michelson-Morley experiment, and it's Michelson, if you're looking it up, folks. Michelson-Morley. And
I am not.
Basically, like in the early 1900s, Michelson was trying to prove that the Earth was stable in its foundations. And the supposition is that light needs a medium to travel through, just like sound does. Sound has to travel through water or air or something that would send the waves onto the next particles. Okay, so what they do is they call this ether. So if we could see light through space, all right, now it doesn't have any medium that sound can travel through, so sound in the vacuum of space doesn't travel, okay? So, but the ether is actually something that light can travel through. And, when the Lord talks about it, I think he created a time-space continuum that we all live in, and I think, I kind of go along these lines. So what they did is they actually set out to measure the ether. All right. And what they did is they created vacuum tubes, and they sent one light in this direction and one light in that direction and measured it from another spot on the Earth. And short story, when they sent the lasers out, because of the distance that they came back, we're not traveling through space at a gazillion miles an hour. Okay. We're not moving around the sun. We're not traveling through space. The only movement the Earth has is the rotation. And they measured it. They've done this experiment hundreds and hundreds of times, and it's only this of the Earth spinning around in one day. Okay, so the supposition is either the Earth is only spinning or the ether is spinning around the Earth, but regardless, it's only 25,000 mile rotation per day. It's the exact same speed, which people have tried to, debunk it and all this other stuff, but many other people have done the experiment and they all come up with the exact same figures. The Earth is just simply not moving except for a little bit of rotation of a one-day period. That would answer a lot of questions about this. So what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, if I just spoke, I'd be ignorant on this one because I don't know the background. I mean, you provided some information there, but I'm trying to think of in the sense of taking astronomy in understanding, because as it relates to the vacuum, I mean, from my understanding always has been that certainly light does slow down in various different mediums, water, etc. We're not even talking about refraction necessarily, but just simply the speed of light itself. I do find it interesting that what they have shown is that when you look at space-time as it relates to like Einstein's theory of relativity, his general theory, what he was able to demonstrate is the role of gravity. And so what we this is very complicated for even modern physicists in the sense of gravity itself is moving along in some quantum level, across something. So the what is there? What is the medium? I think they just say, well, it's space. Is it ether? I know ether was a very early term that came about, but I think there's something there that they observe, but they haven't necessarily perfected in their understanding of gravitational waves. Again, they can observe gravitational waves, but how is it making its way across space and time in that regard?
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with that too. But it was demonstrable. They measured it, and they come out, and it's hundreds of times, and they've done the same experiment. So again, just adding to some of the evidences that could be used for a geocentric model and a stable foundation of the Earth, just spinning like a gyroscope on one spot. Okay. Now we talked about light slowing down as well. That has a lot of implication. It's probably like a topic for a whole nother show, because we can really get into some rabbit trails with light slowing down and getting to a point where he says, a third of the day and a third of the night will be for the sake of the elect. Well, how does that happen? I don't know. So maybe spinning the Earth's rotation, maybe that body that was there when Jesus was crucified comes by and it spins the Earth a little faster. I don't know. Could be. So sound through matter, we got the distance. I want to talk about, you talk about James Webb, you mentioned it before, so, but you didn't explain it. So I'm going to ask you to explain James Webb.
So James Webb is the current space telescope that is kind of the successor, is a good word, of Hubble. And, it was launched, it was put out at what they call a Lagrange point, where it would be able to be shielded from, the sun's, cosmic radiation, solar winds, and blah, blah, blah. But the thing about this James Webb scope is that it is it's outside of the Earth's atmospheric problems, because I actually just got a piece today in the mail, because I ordered this little eyepiece that helps to, it's called an atmospheric dispersion eyepiece, where it's nice because when I'm looking like real high magnification, I had Saturn in my eyepiece in my telescope last week, and man, it was just stunningly beautiful. I mean, and so this is where, again, people, there's some, I don't know, say that they believe Hubble's fake. And some of the pictures that you see from even whether it's Cassini, some of the other spacecraft, Juno and others that have gone out, so all the pictures are photoshopped. And I think, really? I mean, okay. Look, I'm not here to defend NASA. Just let me put that right. I don't care. I'm not. But what I do know is that,
how much could it possibly do?
Yeah. If they say, well, here's a picture of this, and here's what I'll get back to the James Webb in a minute, in the sense that, so one of the things that you see is that what's called as the Cassini division in some of these pictures, and around the rings, you see in the pictures this gap between the outer rings and some of the inner rings, and even the more inner rings. Well, if you have a good enough telescope, you can see the Cassini division. And so the other night I got this brand new, really nice refractor, and it was kind of hot and humid, so that's not the best. The best time to look at something is when it's cold, because there's no humidity and the water vapor, which causes your atmospheric disturbance. So, but I'm in there and I had my wife out there and I go, hey, look at this. I had it at 250 magnification and I could see the Cassini division. So if someone's telling me that picture is fake, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, man, because I can see it right here. And the reason I got that atmospheric eyepiece was because it helps reduce some of that. You see this on a road, right? The heat waves, and it, you see it like a mirage, and or even above anyways, you have those disturbances. Going back to James Webb and Hubble, they're outside of the Earth's atmosphere, so they're able to see things clearly. It's a new telescope. It's resolution. It's got bigger mirrors. And when you're in astronomy, the bigger mirror, the better. It just really is. You're gathering more light. And so it's coming up with these new high resolution pictures of deep places or in space, or at least very dim things that you see in the sky. That, again, if you want resolution on a planet, it's really easy. Are you going to look through the 3-inch? Are you going to look through the 20-inch? I guarantee, and I have a 6-inch refractor, and then I have a 12.5-inch. It's called a CDK scope, but I guarantee with the 12-inch, I'm going to get much better resolution and brightness when I'm looking at Saturn next time. I don't have the 12-inch set up yet, but I'm going to go out there and I'm going to take photographs of these. And I'm like, man, look at this. So those kind of things help. That's what James Webb is helping to alleviate, is some of the challenges that you have of some of the other scopes.
Okay. So it's a big old scope. They got it out in space, and it's going to confirm some of the other pictures that we had. And from what I understand, yeah, it's already causing a ruckus because it's proving some things in that are creation-centric rather than evolution-centric. There's a whole nother topic there. So that's fun.
It really is. Yep, it really is. It's causing some trouble because some of their models, unfortunately, astronomers, they become, as all scientists do in many ways, they become very confident and in many ways arrogant. And it's sad because they don't allow themselves to, oftentimes, by definition, the scientific method should say, hey, by the way, this is what we understand today, but it could be totally upended tomorrow. Now, they might say that, but they don't really mean it. And so some of the things that are coming back from the James Webb, they just turn. I'll give you one example, and this is in the biology realm. When Mary Schweitzer, professor of anthropology, discovered some proteins in blood in some of the dinosaur fossils.
Yeah, viable too.
Viable. She got excoriated because she's horrible. But so she did it 17 more times, and other people have come along and said, no, this shouldn't be this way. We should not be able to see blood and other things if these dinosaurs are very young or very old. It's just we don't have the biological systems. So instead of submitting to the science, they decided to ad hominem attack her. Thankfully, she's been vindicated at least 17 times. But it doesn't necessarily change their viewpoint. They don't turn around and go, hey, by the way, we're changing our mind as it relates to the age of the dinosaurs. There must be some system that we don't understand. Which, hey, guys, be open-minded. Could it be that
you're wrong?
Correct. Could it be? They won't go there. So
this has only been 4,000 years or so. Yeah, that's crazy. And so the Hubble was the original telescope. I was like 1923. Kind of went out there and did that. And
no, Hubble was actually I think it was in the 80s and 90s.
But that's when the telescope came out. But Hubble was way back in the.
Yeah, Hubble was in the 20s. I'm sorry. Yes, Edwin Hubble. Yep.
Yeah, and then and he was looking at the stars, and now basically Hubble was figured out concentric spheres of not universes, galaxies. So there would be one sphere and it'd be like a balloon, and it would all be on this sphere, and then it was like 7 of them, and they were basically expanding, and not at an analog rate but a digital rate, which, if it was at just a big bang kind of a thing, it would be at an analog rate. They would just be flowing like this. But there's literally the concentric rings that are distances that are measured in digital, even like digital distances. Like I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe you can explain it.
That's an interesting question, because when you think about what Hubble did, Hubble in the 1920s was huge refractor, man. And I would love to have that, but super long, and they're huge. But he discovered what we know today, or at least mathematically, or what we observe is something called the redshift, which led him to what's known today as the Hubble constant. And the Hubble constant is this idea that the universe is expanding at a very specific rate. It's interesting too, because there's a couple different ways without getting all the details of how they determine the Hubble constant, or just the expansion rate, I'll say it that way. So you have Hubble's way that he came, and it was a certain number. But then lately, when the cosmic background radiation, when they started looking at it through that way, it's interesting to me that even today, I read about this in Astronomy Magazine, the Hubble ratio, the expansion rate, and the cosmic background ratio, where is approaching it from a different way, they don't match. So they're having this conflict as it relates to what exactly is this expansion, the expansion rate, because the cosmic background radiation was predicted. If that expansion was true, there should be this cosmic background radiation. So they have seemingly discovered that. But you know what's interesting too is you get others that are coming and saying, hey, those that are subscribed to the electric universe, that's a whole nother topic, but they're going, this idea of an expansion isn't necessarily true, that if you take the electric universe, it will explain the red shifts in a way that's different. So to me, I think, again, astronomically, or at least astronomers need to be a little bit more humble in saying, let's keep all of our options open. What we're observing is a fact. How to postulate how it got there requires humility. What system?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would 100% agree. And as a final note, you were talking about, the new heavens and the new earth and the new Jerusalem, there'll be no need of the sun. Well, if we're revolving around the sun, then the earth would just be flying through space at this point. But again, that would also lead me to believe that, hey, maybe it is stable in the center, and just, Jesus will be the light in that whole situation. So it's just another icing on the cake, if you would, to the particular model we're looking at. And the thing about it is, it does not change any of the mathematics. And real quickly, I'll show, well, if we're here and the sun is going around the earth like this, okay, the planets can still go around the sun as it's spinning, which mathematically would give you the exact same thing as if they were all spinning around it. And you can look that up. And if you want to ask me more about that, I'll be producing a little sketch for it. Not quite so amateur as this one, but along those lines. And then just TheHiddenDay at protonmail.com, and then I'll send you what I make up for that. So just kind of, that's my supposition, if you would. Again, if I'm wrong, no biggie. I'm just looking at it, and that's what I see, because when we go home, we'll all figure this out. And like we always say, Mondo, that 30 seconds of silence when we get to heaven is for all of us to correct our charts.
Some of us might need more than 30 seconds.
Okay. So anything else to add on the subject?
I think it's a great subject to explore, because again, I'm out looking at these things. And pretty soon, once my observatory is done, I'll be out there every night and trying to understand God's creation. I think, stay humble, don't fight about it. I appreciate, like you said, if you just said it, hey, if we're wrong about something, so be it. But I think too often there's so much acrimony by brothers and sisters against each other, and it's really embarrassing. I mean, names are being called. Hey, we're all here to explore God's creation, to give him glory. The exact systems and processes are worthy of exploration. But man, at the end of the day, just be nice. Be nice.
Yeah, we'll figure it out when we get there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right. So would you take us out, brother?
Yeah, absolutely. Father in heaven, again, we see in your word, it's what we're doing here, Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of the Lord. And the firmament, the skies show your handiwork, and we truly are in awe of you. We're blessed. We're blessed that you give us the technology to explore your world and your universe, and as creatures, as humans, having the curiosity to try to understand how it all works at the macro level and at the micro level. We pray that you bless people that are watching, that they would continue to see you and your and all the glory that you've done, and as most importantly, Lord, that they would see what you've done in the glory of Jesus Christ dying for sinners, so that those who put their faith and trust in him would be saved. And that's we don't, it's not a cliche, Lord. It's just 100% true. And as David said, when we get there on that day, through Jesus Christ, we'll be able to go, oh, we need to fix that. So pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We agree. So Yeshua HaMashiach willing, Lord willing, we will see you next time on the Hidden Day. And thanks so much, Mondo, for coming on. It's been awesome.
Amen, brother.